you're ready.
Alright. Hi everybody, my name is Ella Bender and today I'm going to be talking to you about the clinical trial I conducted in high school to test the pain reliever usage. So my essential question was, how can I evaluate the usage of pain relievers in Millis High School in order to provide better treatment alternatives for students? Why did I do this? You know the saying, our body is a temple. As high schoolers especially, I noticed we're putting things into our body that we don't even know about across the board. In general, I knew a lot of students that were taking pain relievers every single day, especially athletes. And I wanted to take this and educate students about practicing mindfulness every day to just know a little bit more about something that they're doing. My mentor was Daniela Burgos. She's a clinical and data analyst at Novartis Biomedical Research Institution. She's a professional in this field, so she was the perfect person to mentor for me for this project. We've already had a prior relationship. We worked together my sophomore year for STEAM job shadows. She's overall a wonderful person. She helped me actually write my college essay. She helped me talk about majors. She ended up just becoming a really good friend, and I had great conversation with her. We met about twice a week, every week, so she was literally there for me every step of this project. So getting started. So I originally started this project May of my junior year. Until about August, I was in the brainstorming phase, going back and forth with my mentor and Ms. Cookies and Ms. Cheney to finalize a project. When I got to August to pitch the project at the beginning of the school year in September, I presented to many different people. So including the English board, I also had to pitch my project to the STEAM board, as well as my mentor to get approval from her. As she has a full-time job, this was something that she was doing out of her own time, and I wanted to make sure that she was able to take this on. And then I also had to discuss with Ms. Molinari about this because a majority of my project relied on her access to our school's data. So I talked to her multiple times to make sure she was on board. We all know she works in the middle school and the high school. She's a very busy woman, and I didn't want to put more on her plate than she needed. The draft stages consisted from November to January, where I started a rough timeline. This was very rough of a timeline. It ended up being altered many times due to my own things coming up, other people's, Ms. Molinari's schedule. During this time, I also had to gain approval to do this project as I was collecting data in the high school. This consisted of consent forms that I sent out because I wanted to make sure I was following proper ethical guidelines. These consent forms were sent out by Mr. Dickey, who was a huge help in doing that. These are the consent forms I want to talk a little bit about. So obviously there's a little blurb. I utilized Google Forms, which was the easiest way to make this myself. Like I said, I wanted to follow HIPAA. As this isn't a real trial, I wanted to follow it as closely as possible because it's something that I was really interested in. I wanted to do it right. The consent form was to opt out. So although my data was not using names, I still wanted people to know that I was collecting data about them. Basically, everyone was categorized into a number. I only ended up getting one response saying they didn't want their name recorded because they were taking this medicine twice daily for their own personal needs. That made my life a lot easier. So all you had to do on the form was just record if you didn't want your name included, and I would just factor that out. I set a strict deadline for this consent form because I didn't want it to hinder the rest of my project. So I gave students 1 week to respond, and then after that I closed it, and I was able to move forward with my trial phase. Before I could start that, however, I had a lot of research to do. First, I researched proper clinical trials. Like I've mentioned before, following ethics was very important to me in this project. I also researched Advil and Tylenol, which are the two over-the-counter drugs that are administered in our high school. They're the only two our nurse has access to. I also researched tolerance, which was a big part of my project, which I will explain later on in the presentation. And lastly, data presentation. This isn't a normal senior project as it was very data heavy. I wanted to ensure that my data was easy to understand for students that didn't have the same background knowledge that I did. Here's my data here. So I have it kind of categorized into before and after. So it originally started on paper copies, which was the best way to transfer the data from Ms. Molinari to myself. I then took those paper copies and put them into Excel, which is a platform similar to Google Sheets. that data was then transferred into something more readable that I could use to educate. So this data was, obviously I couldn't just put that out because it's just kind of a big blurb of stuff. So this was just for me to organize it and get everything down on paper. What I would do is there was 9 weeks of my trial. So after every week, I would get a paper from Ms. Molinari and I would immediately transfer that onto a sheet. I had 9 little tabs on my sheet where I would have each week of data. This was very helpful. Organization was one of the biggest priorities in my project. And as you can see that after, I was able to make these 2 graphs, a pie chart. This is just a table organizing all of my data and the results. As you can see, 53% of students in our high school are taking over-the-counter drugs for headaches. This is the sum, 296 pills taken. These are the percentages of what they were used for. I had them categorized into cramp, headache, injury, sore, and other. And these were recorded when students came into the nurse's office. Based on these results, these are some alternatives that I curated to bring to the high school and to use as an educational tool. The first thing, the 2 things on the left, they're menthol treated products. So one is a spray, one is a patch, so there's 2 different ways to apply. Menthol is a natural anti-inflammatory that can help with injury, muscles, cramps, and things like that. Really good for shoulder pain especially, back pain. And then Thermacare. We all know the hand warmers. Same thing, it's a disposable heating pad. Really good for cramps, super discreet. And then 2 essential oils. Peppermint oil is good for cramp relief. It's also a really great energizer if you're just, having a hard time focusing in class, I found, so it kind of doubled. And then lavender, great for cramps as well as stress relief. So I also like that both of these not only provide an alternative for a point of discomfort, but also could benefit the student in school in general. When I actually presented, I'll get to that later. The biggest takeaway I want people to have is that our school in 35 days used 296 pills. So 1 bottle has about 340 pills in it, which is supposed to last someone about a year. So that's a lot. And I think that's the biggest takeaway I want everyone to get out of this. Whether or not you understand the nitty-gritty of the data, we have this right here. At my senior project fair, I was able to present these results and provide a little explanation of the differences of each. Students in general were kind of unaware of what even the differences were between Advil and Tylenol. I was then able to also take these alternatives and have them as samples for students to try to learn about. I wanted people to learn about them prior so that I could, when I donated them to the nurse's office, they already knew it was an option. I actually had 2 students come up to me during the day saying that when they put the lavender oil under their nose, they felt relief from their headache, so I was very happy to hear that. So I hope that that inspired people to practice mindfulness and try something before they lean towards the medication that's going to medicate your entire body. For this presentation, I also came up with a catchphrase that easiest isn't always healthiest. Again, when I researched data presentation, all the data is very heavy and hard to understand without the background knowledge, so I wanted something that would stick in someone's brain just to remember. So I thought a catchphrase would be really great for students to see. I was able to then include this on my bulletin board in the school nurse's office. This is right when you walk in. It goes through a little more in depth of the differences between each. Ibuprofen and acetaminophen are the medical, kind of the drug term. Advil and Tylenol are the brand names. So I have those up there with their differences. They're also known as. Our school's data is in the middle to stand out for students so that they can see that their data is right on there. So it's more relevant to them. It makes a more lasting impact. Below, I provided pamphlets and alternatives so that students can practice mindfulness and learn more about the alternatives that I have provided. My takeaways. Students were not educated about the medicine they were putting in their bodies. People didn't know the differences or what they even did. And there tended to be a lack of access to these alternatives, so students didn't really have another option. So that's why I wanted to donate these things after researching them. My biggest challenge. My mentor was not working in the school. She had a very busy schedule on her own. Oftentimes we had to reschedule and cancel because of things that came up in her work life. However, the biggest obstacle was switching over from Google Suites to Office Suites. My mentor was outside our domain, so I wasn't able to share Google Sheets with her. So I took it upon myself to learn how to use Excel so that we could better communicate instead of sending PDFs back and forth. we were able to edit right on the same document, which was a huge help. The project's future, I hope to experiment with data collection in the school. I hope students utilize the rich environment that we were in, not just with medication usage, but in general, all the things that we can learn from our student body, as well as inspire students to learn a useful skill that they can use in their further career. My personal statement, I was able to network in a professional setting, which is something that I really enjoy and I was able to get better at. I learned that this is a team effort, especially in research. It takes many people. I could not have just done this by myself. And the career applicable skills I learned, I will be able to use in the future and in college, and I'm very grateful for that. I would like to say thank you to my mentor, Daniela Burgos. I would not have been able to do this without her. Ms. Molinari for the access that she's given me, Ms. Copisa and Ms. Cheney for guiding me as a STEAM scholar, and Ms. Drodicki for allowing me to provide these forms. Is my work cited? Any questions?